In the previous videos, I talked about something called the present perfect and the present perfect continuous. In this video, I'm talking about something called the past perfect. The past perfect is very similar to the present perfect. In the present perfect, we have the verb have, or the third person conjugation has. Okay? And we also have a past participle. We have our past participle that could be regular, irregular. Remember that if it's regular, we add ed. If it's irregular, you really should probably find some list of irregular verbs and look at that list or memorize them. And there are applications online that you can find to practice irregular verbs, to memorize them. You can listen to songs and watch movies and hear the way people speak and hear those irregular verbs used and memorize them through conversation, through making flashcards. You know, you could put the verb do and have do, did, done, go, went, gone, something like that. But really, in one way or another, for the irregular verbs, there's no pattern. It takes practice. So this is our basic format for present perfect, but now we're looking at past perfect. And the only difference is this verb right here. This is called the present perfect because the verb have is in its present tense form. The action is not present. It's really about completed actions or actions that started in the past. But the verb have is in the present. However, for the past perfect, we are actually going to put that verb in its real past tense form, had. The rest of this formula will look the same. So I could say something like, she had already eaten breakfast when her mother called. She had already eaten breakfast when her mother called. The use of the past perfect here is to distinguish two actions that happened at different times, but both happened in the past. I want to show the order that these happened in. This action happened first, so I'm using the past perfect. She had already eaten breakfast when her mother called. This is very similar to Spanish, almost word for word. You could say, ella ya había comido o ya había almorzado cuando su madre la llamó. Or cuando llamó su madre. Something like that. There are ways you could play around with that sentence in Spanish. It might be a little confusing with that meaning here to get that her mother called to her. But the idea there is this part here. Había comido or había almorzado. She had already eaten. She had eaten. She had eaten breakfast. When her mother called, we know that this action happened first because I'm using the past perfect. Here, I'm just using the past tense. She had already eaten breakfast when her mother called. Okay, so that's one way that we use the past perfect, and that's the core of the use of this form, is to separate two actions in the past and to talk about the order. Which one happened first? If this happened first, before this action, this happened first, and this action came later, and we want to really make sure that that's clear, we can use the past perfect here. Of course, we could say, she ate breakfast and then her mother called. That also shows us the order, just using the simple past. She ate breakfast and then her mother called. But this is another way to do that, by using the past perfect We already have that information here without saying first, second, then, before, after, something like that. Okay? And like with the present perfect, we also could have the, like with the present perfect, we also could have a continuous form. We can have the past perfect continuous. The past perfect continuous. And this would look like the present perfect continuous with the verb to be in its participle form, been. The to be verb, am, is, are, was, were, but the participle form of that, been, plus ing. And the difference between present perfect continuous and past perfect continuous, again, is this verb right here, that form, had. The rest looks the same. And again, this is very similar to the grammar for this part of the language in Spanish. There are many things between English and Spanish that are different. There are also many things that are the same or similar. This is a time where there are many parallels, and Spanish grammar can help you with the English grammar here, but it's not exactly the same. Very similar, but not the same. So here, again, we're putting this verb in its past form, had, been, with ing. So let's go back to the example. She had been eating breakfast She had been eating breakfast, and now we would put some time for 20 minutes. When her mother called. She had been eating breakfast for 20 minutes when her mother called. Or we could say she had already been eating breakfast for 20 minutes when her mother called. This would give more emphasis to the idea that, wow, this was happening for a long time. 20 minutes, she was eating and eating and eating for 20 minutes when her mother called. Okay, but in this sentence, this started first, but it did not finish. It started before her mother called, and it continued even when her mother called. It continued, boom, and her mother called, and maybe she continued to eat, maybe she stopped, we don't know. But we know that when her mother called, she had already eaten for 20 minutes. Okay? That's one example. Another quick example here. Let's say she had already, and I'm using this word already again to add emphasis, to say, yeah, this was a long time or something more than expected. She had already been studying. She had already been studying Spanish for 2 years before she went to Mexico. In this example, we have our verb had, that past tense form of have, had. We have our participle been. And then we have our continuous form, the ing, making the past perfect continuous. She had been studying. Or to add that emphasis, yeah, this was a long time. She did that for 2 years. Wow, that's more than what's expected. She had already been studying Spanish for 2 years before she went to Mexico. Maybe in this scenario, you're thinking, oh, she's going to Mexico to learn Spanish. Well, she had already been studying Spanish for 2 years. She had completed 2 years. That was more than what the people expected for her trip to Mexico. Well, This is another example of how you can use the past perfect continuous. Keep studying and enjoy.